to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ponte. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen here. Make sure I get the right slides. Okay. All right. So, good morning. My name is Chris Zimmerman. I am the Director of Financial Assistance at College of Southern Maryland. I've been doing this for a few years for Calvert High School. It's one of my sessions that I enjoy the most doing because it's with the parents of juniors who it's great that you're involved in attending this session because you really are ahead of the game. Really, a lot of the information when I'm talking with families, they've, it's the spring semester of their student senior year or even after graduation. So I'm glad that you have decided to join us for this session so you kind of get an idea of what the next year is in store for you in terms of applying for financial aid and going forward. So just a couple of things. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. But it is a relatively small group, so I definitely will be able to answer those questions. Also, I have provided this slide deck to Ms. Ponte, so she can share it with you afterwards. That's not a problem. My contact information should be, or for the office, should be there at the end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our staff. Even if your students aren't planning on coming to CSM, please don't let that be a deterrent. We work with lots of families that are in Calvert County that don't intend to necessarily go to CSM. But we certainly welcome working with anyone. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So what are we going to be talking about this evening or this morning? We're going to be talking some things to look at things to consider when you're looking at colleges, kind of comparison wise. What is financial aid? And then we're going to talk about some basic financial aid descriptions and acronyms. What is financial need, how colleges use that, how that's determined and how that is used by colleges. What are some of the basic requirements for financial aid? We're not going to go into a full in-depth everything list because each student is going to be a little different. And then what are some of the categories, types, and sources of financial aid? And then we'll briefly touch upon the FAFSA. This is not a FAFSA help session, but this just kind of give you an idea of what the process is currently, and then we'll talk about some changes. So, one thing I like to do is to kind of provide some information on college comparisons. So I've got 3 different sites here that provide some good information, and they're coming from a different perspective. So I'm going to touch upon the College Navigator first. The College Navigator is a site run by the Department of Education, and it's really primarily data driven. And there's a lot of data that colleges provide, and it's all in the same format. So you really can compare colleges using the same metrics. So they'll provide size, they'll provide average financial aid, what type of a setting the college is, things of that nature. College Board is a little more holistic. It kind of gives more of a broad portrait as well as college portraits. And part of that is because that information is provided by the colleges, but not necessarily in the same standardized format. So you'll see some differences in there. So you get some good information on types of programs, things of that nature. And just bear in mind, it's, a lot of it is self-reported by the colleges and surveys for all 3 sites. The difference being College Navigator is based on statistics and information that colleges are mandated to report to the Department of Education. But with that being said, numbers and pictures on a website only go so far. There really is no substitute for going to visit a campus with the student to see what the feel is. I used to work in admissions, so I'm always going to push kind of visit the college and get a feel for if it's the right fit for you, because in what college may look one thing on paper and program wise, but when you get there, it may just realize it's not for you. So next thing we're going to briefly talk about is the Academic Common Market. And what the Academic Common Market is it's a unique program with schools in the Southeast United States. And it allows students who are attending public institutions that are outside of the state that they live in to potentially be eligible for in-state tuition rates if the program is not offered in Maryland. So I'm going to give an example. I have no idea if this is accurate or not, but excuse me, say the student wants to go to wants to get a program for agricultural engineering, and that's what they really want to do, and they found a program at the University of Florida. And so they take a look and work with the state of Maryland through MHEC to see if that program of agricultural engineering is offered anywhere in Maryland. If it is not offered in Maryland, what the student would be eligible for is to be considered an in-state tuition for Florida, an in-state tuition student at Florida for tuition purposes, not for residency or for financial aid purposes, but just from a tuition perspective. So the student would be able to receive those lower tuition rates as if they were a resident of the institution. So the complete listing of programs is listed on the MHEC website for new students. So this would be for seniors right now. The application cycle is open now till June 30th. I would imagine for next year's seniors, for the current juniors, the cycle would be similar. Florida and Texas only offer it for graduate students. So the example I gave, as you can see, was just a made-up one. But individual institutions may have additional restrictions. There may be some institutions that only offer the tuition discount for rising juniors and seniors. The one thing to be mindful of is that if a student is eligible for this program and does receive the benefit, it's only good while they remain in the program of study that they qualify for. If they go to the school and they start that program and don't like it and want to switch to business management, well, that's probably not going to be eligible, as there are many schools in Maryland that offer business management. So that's something that's somewhat of a unique program. And now would be a good time to kind of take a look and see if there are any programs that students might be interested in, if the student is looking to go outside of the state of Maryland for higher education. So we're going to talk briefly about what is financial aid. Financial aid in a nutshell is funding that the student or parent doesn't have that is used to pay educational expenses. So it's coming from a third party. Whether that third party happens to be the Department of Education, State of Maryland, the college or university themselves. It really doesn't matter what the source is, but the important part is it's money that the student or parent does not currently have to pay for those educational expenses. It can be used pretty much at any school, any type of school. So you've got private colleges and universities like Stevenson or Johns Hopkins, public and 2-year and 4-year colleges and universities, the University System of Maryland, Bowie, University of Maryland College Park, William and Mary, the SUNY schools in New York, community colleges, CSM, Prince George's Community College, really, many of those different types of schools, as well as technical or vocational schools. So you'll see some schools, Lincoln Tech for automotive, for example, or some of those other 2-year trade-specific schools most likely are going to participate in the federal financial aid program. And so that's where the different types of schools come into play. So now we're going to get into some of the specific financial aid terms. What is cost of attendance? Really, the cost of attendance is what does the school estimate it is going to cost a student to attend that institution for one academic year. So one thing to be mindful of when we're talking about financial aid programs is, unlike admissions where a student will apply to a school as a freshman, hopefully, and get into their school of choice and want to stay there for the 4 years, for financial aid, you're going to apply every year. So when you see financial aid figures and information, you're going to most likely see it in a 1-year increment. So when we talk about cost of attendance, that's going to be to attend the school for 1 year. You've got two different types of expenses. You've got those direct expenses, or those are the expenses that the student will receive the bill directly from the institution. And I say the student because even if the parents are helping to assist and pay those bills, it is ultimately the student's responsibility to pay for the classes, just as a reminder for the parents. And that also means that the student's educational records are the student's the student's records, and by default, parent information, or parents do not have access to the educational records or financial or disciplinary records of students in college unless the student provides a release. So that's a little bit of a difference from high school. I just wanted to make parents aware of that. So again, going back, you've got direct expenses, which are the tuition fees if the student's living on campus, room and board. Indirect expenses are going to basically be everything else. It could be books and supplies, because students can buy them either at the bookstore, from their friends, online, rent and food if the student's living off campus or at home. And really, those are considered out-of-pocket expenses, meaning the student has those expenses that don't go directly to the school. Now, the next slide is going to be an example of how costs of attendance vary widely from institution to institution. And so what you see here is the first two institutions, Georgetown and Stevenson, are considered private institutions. The next two institutions are University of Maryland College Park and Salisbury, which are two-year public institutions. And then you've got the College of Southern Maryland listed there. So what this chart shows you is, yes, there is going to potentially be a very large variance in what the costs are based on the type of institution. Now, part of that reason is when you think of it, when you are looking at schools that are considered public institutions, like the bottom three on that list, that means they receive a significant portion of their annual operating budget from the state that they are located in. So the state subsidizes some of the cost of attendance or the tuition and fees for those students to attend that institution. So that is why those public institutions' costs or tuition and fees are going to be significantly lower on paper than some of the private institutions. Now, when I say that they're going to be lower on paper, that's where financial aid comes into play, whether it's athletic scholarships, academic scholarships, grants, things of that nature. So what you see here is what I would consider the sticker price of an institution, but it's not necessarily what the final tally is going to be. Similar to if you go buy a car, you see what the sticker price is, but more times than not, that sticker price doesn't equal what the paperwork that you signed for is. So when you take a look at schools, don't necessarily get turned away or turned off by what the tuition and fees are, because what you want to then take a look at is what are the average financial aid awards. Because if Georgetown provides a financial aid package of, let's say, $45,000, that brings it down to about $25,000, which could very well be very similar to University of Maryland College Park prices. So that's something that I do want to say. Just because a private institution may have a higher price tag doesn't necessarily mean that that is what the student is ultimately going to pay. Now, the other thing to be mindful of is that last column, the total costs, are per academic year. So you definitely want to kind of keep that in mind as you're planning going forward. In terms of the expected expenses over the life of the student's education. All right, next we're going to talk about EFC, expected family contribution. So what that is an eligibility index that is used by the Department of Education and by schools to determine what a student is going to be eligible for to receive in terms of need-based financial aid. It does not mean it's an ultimate dollar amount that the student will be responsible to pay. Some institutions are able to utilize that and make that what the student is going to pay, but most institutions will not be able to do that. So what it does is when the student completes the FAFSA results do come up with what's called this EFC or eligibility index. And that's used, like I said, by the Department of Education to determine what a student's going to be eligible for in federal aid. It's going to be used by the state of Maryland if the student is planning on going to a school in the state of Maryland for any Maryland state financial assistance. And then it'll also be used by the institutions to determine what they might be eligible for institution funds. So the FAFSA and the EFC is made up of two components, both the student portion and the parent portion. Again, it's calculated using the data from the FAFSA information, and that EFC stays the same no matter what the institution that the student goes to. And that's important because the EFC and the cost of attendance are, when you look at those two together, that is what determines a student's financial need. So a couple slides ago, we had the different costs of attendance for a student. And let's say the student had a FAFSA result of 25,000. And so if we go to the private institution, say Georgetown, where the cost of attendance was $70,000 and the student's expected family contribution was $25,000, that gets you to a financial need of $45,000. Now you take that same student at University of Maryland College Park, where the cost of attendance was, say, $24,000. They have that same EFC of $25,000, and based on the costs at College Park, that student does not demonstrate financial need. So that's important to know that the FAFSA results are going to stay the same from school to school, and that's why if students are looking at different types of institutions and they're applying for financial aid at different institutions, the student's financial aid award letter or financial aid package might be significantly different from school to school. And again, first thing to take a look at is what is the costs for that school, and you'll see probably there's going to be some variance there. If you've got schools that are very similar in costs, so let's say you've applied to University of Maryland College Park, Towson, and Salisbury, your financial aid packages are probably going to be relatively similar between the three schools. They have similar costs of attendance. They have similar funds available to help pay to help provide assistance to students. So you're going to see some variations, but they're going to be much smaller than if you take a look at Salisbury and say Stevenson at the same time. So now we're going to talk about what are the different sources of financial aid. This is not a full and comprehensive list, but it just gives you an idea that students and parents can receive funding to help assist for college expenses from multiple sources. So the federal government is the single biggest provider of financial aid, both in the term of federal grants as well as student loans. The state of Maryland has a number of different programs of financial aid. Both there's a combination of need-based, non-need-based. We have some funds that are allocated by our legislators. And they also have some funds for unique populations. So Maryland has quite a comprehensive financial aid scholarship and grant program as well. Colleges and universities. Colleges and universities are a great resource for financial aid awards, which can be made up of a combination of scholarships, which are generally academic-based or athletic-based or talent-based, as well as need-based grants. And then private sources and civic organizations. Private sources could be the local Rotary organization or Lions Club. Also could be churches. We see a lot of students that receive scholarship assistance from their local church. And then employers as a tuition benefit, either for the student themselves as an employee, or as a parent benefit. They provide assistance or scholarships for dependents of employees. So those are certainly some other sources to take a look at. So what are the different types of aid? There's two main categories, and I'll break them down on the next couple slides, so I'm not going to go into too much depth here, but you've got gift aid and self-help options. So gift aid, that's the money that is considered free money, meaning money you do not need to pay back. It's the money that everybody wants to apply for first, which is great, is what it's there for. Again, within gift aid, you've got two different types of gift aid. Generally speaking, you've got scholarships and grants. Both of these do not need to be paid back. Gift aid for scholarships is generally awarded based on some sort of characteristic, whether it's an academic criteria, whether it's GPA, rank in class, standardized test scores, could be a unique skill, could be an athletic award. So if students are looking at participating in Division I or Division II athletics, those institutions may have athletic scholarships available for students that want to participate on those teams. Or it could be a unique characteristic. So let's say, let's just say that Towson University had a donation to their foundation from an alum who was in their band and really wants to promote the music program. So they now have some scholarships specifically for music majors who play trumpet. So that might be something where students could apply for that, and the basis for that scholarship could be on the fact of how well they play the trumpet. So there are definitely going to be scholarships that are different, and some non-traditional type organizations. As an example, every year we have a couple of students that receive scholarships from the U.S. Bowling Federation. So again, not necessarily things that you would ordinarily consider as scholarships, but really those are wonderful opportunities for students to receive money, and they don't have to pay that back. Grants are going to be usually awarded based on the financial needs, so the FAFSA application and what is the family financial situation. That's not to say that there are no scholarships that have a need component or no grants that have a minimum GPA to be eligible for or for renewal. So you're going to see a lot of gift aid type of programs that will have a kind of a blend of there may be a minimum academic requirement and then need preferred or need required. So again, you want to take a look at what are some of those requirements, and for any of the scholarships that students may receive, find out if it is eligible to be renewed, and if so, what are the requirements. Does the student need to be full-time with a 2.0? Does the student need to be full-time with a 3.0? Things like that. So that way, again, you can plan from a financial perspective, because again, college is going to be a multi-year experience, whether you're going to CSM as a 2-year school or any of the 4-year institutions. All right. So the next part of financial aid, which not the preferred method for a lot of students and understandable, are the self-help options. A lot of people, when I have conversations with students and families about their financial aid letters, they say, well, I wasn't offered any financial aid, I was only offered loans. Well, if you go back to the beginning of my presentation where I was talking about what is financial aid, it's money that is helped to pay for educational expenses that the student or parent doesn't currently have. So loans are considered financial aid. And part of it is also because let's take a look at student loans, for example. Again, it is money that students will borrow from the Department of Education. And the one nice thing about student loans is as long as the student's in school at least half time, those funds are deferred, meaning you don't have to pay it back. And same thing goes for the parents. They can take out a parent loan called a plus loan, and they have the option that as long as the student's in school, they can defer those payments as well. We always recommend that if you can make some payments, even if they're smaller $20, $25 a month payments, certainly do so, because it'll help keep the overall interest costs down for the life of the loan. But again, as long as the student's in school, there is those options to defer. And not have to make those repayments. Because again, from the Department of Education's perspective, the student's going to school to get a degree, to ultimately get a job and a career, and ultimately earn a salary. And at that point, once the student has graduated and is settled in their job, then they will be going into the repayment process. So it doesn't have to begin while the student's in school. Second type of self-help option is called work study. It's a part-time job. Schools that participate in the federal work-study program are provided an allotment of funds from the Department of Education, and they give students the opportunity to have a job either on campus, could be in the bookstore, could be in the fitness center, could be as a lab assistant or a teaching assistant, as well as opportunities in the community. There are community service requirements that the schools must meet, criteria that they must meet. So, for example, it could be a student who's doing tutoring, who wants to be a teacher and is doing tutoring at the local elementary school, or somebody who's working with the local chamber of commerce, which would be, these are some programs that might consider to be, volunteer work if the student were just to go to that outside organization, that community organization, but through this program they have the opportunity of earning a paycheck. Work study funds should not be considered part of, helping to pay the tuition and fees, only because those tuition and fees are generally due before the semester starts. And just like any other paycheck, the student has to work to actually earn those funds. So if a work study award is included on an award letter, think of it as can earn up to this amount for living expenses or for miscellaneous expenses, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. If a student doesn't show up for work, then obviously they're not going to receive those funds. So we're going to talk about Maryland programs. I'm going to talk a little more in depth about some of these programs. But as you can see here, Maryland does have a wide selection of program types. You have 2 different programs or 3 different programs that are specifically need-based programs, so the student does need to fill out the FAFSA. The Guaranteed Access Grant is the largest grant program that the Maryland Higher Education offers. And that is tied to the tuition and fees at the highest public institution in Maryland, which I believe this year is College Park. So what the Guaranteed Access Grant Program offers is for students that qualify, that they would be eligible for an award up to the full tuition and fees at College Park or potentially at a private institution, as well as other public institutions. The educational assistance grant can be up to $3,000 a year, again, depending on the costs of the institution. Schools do receive some part-time grant funds for students that are going to school less than full-time, so the Guaranteed Access and Educational Grant requires students to go full-time. Legislative awards, like I said, our state delegates and senators do have funds that are allocated to them for their constituents on a yearly basis. And so each delegate or senator has, like I said, the pot of funds, and they will handle their distribution of funds however they see fit. And the reason I say that is you may have one delegate that asks for an application. You have another delegate that may want just a copy of the FAFSA information. You may have a senator who wants an application, and then they will want to meet with students to discuss, an essay or something along those lines. Like I said, so each one of those delegates and legislators has their own criteria, and you can apply to utilize funds from multiple delegates. There's no restriction that has to be your specific delegate, although with that being said, most of the delegates do try and give to their constituents first. Now, I know in Calvert County we've got, I believe, 3 delegates that handle different parts of the county. So that certainly, I certainly would encourage you to reach out to all 3 delegates when the time comes. And then we have some unique populations. So I'll touch briefly upon the Conroy Scholarship. This is a scholarship for children and spouses of 100% disabled or killed in the line of duty public service. So it could be military, it could be police officer, it could be fire, rescue, EMS. So if the service member or the public service worker was killed in the line of duty or suffered 100% disability as a result of a service-connected injury, the students may receive a scholarship up to the tuition and fees for their institution on each academic year. And then we have some tuition waivers that are eligible for students who go to any of the public institutions, whether it's the University System of Maryland or the community colleges. If students were ever were placed into Maryland foster care, they may be eligible for a full tuition waiver. If students are considered unaccompanied homeless youth, they may be eligible for a waiver. If we have students that are members of the Maryland National Guard, they are eligible for a partial tuition waiver. And then students that are receiving Social Security benefits based on their own disability may be eligible for a tuition waiver as well, depending on other financial aid. So we're going to talk briefly about the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship, which is a relatively new program through the state of Maryland. It's what's considered a last dollar need-based scholarship. So students must complete the FAFSA, must list at least one school in the state of Maryland to receive that FAFSA. There are some both academic requirements for a student as well as income requirements based on the family. And then what this program is students who go to their local community college. So for students that are in Calvert County, that would be College of Southern Maryland. They are eligible if they're deemed eligible from the state of Maryland to receive this scholarship. They are eligible to have whatever tuition and fees that are not covered by other certain types of financial aid covered by the state of Maryland, up to $5,000 annually or the annual tuition. So if a student's tuition, let's say for the year, is going to be $4,000, $2,000 a semester, and they receive a $1,000 Pell Grant, they're going to be, and the state of Maryland says they're eligible, they meet the criteria for promise, they could receive the remaining $3,000 as a scholarship through the state of Maryland and not have to make that payment themselves. So this is a relatively new program. This is the second year of the program, and it seems to be going pretty well with the state. I know that they have committed to potentially viewing an expansion into the 4-year program. That might be a couple of years down the line, but this is certainly something that that seems to be well received and should be around for a while. Next, we're going to talk briefly about a state of Maryland program for students who may not be wanting to go directly into a associate's or bachelor's degree program, but are looking to work in the trades. So this would be students that are enrolling in a workforce development sequence. So that could be plumbing, HVAC, welding, those types of hands-on program trade skills. It's eligible for students who are Maryland residents or high school graduates. They must be enrolled in an eligible workforce development sequence at a participating community college. So they don't necessarily have to be at CSM. So if the student wants to go to a program that happens to be offered at Prince George's or Anne Arundel, they could be eligible for that. Each school is going to have their own listing of programs that have been sent to the state of Maryland for approval. And again, each college may have some additional criteria, but I highlight this because I want the students and families to know that there are funds available for students that are going into the non-credit programs or the skills or trades as well. I briefly touched upon this earlier, but these are some of the different types of institutional aid. Again, merit is generally going to be based through determined through the admissions office as part of the admissions process and the application process. Again, could be based on academics or athletics or skills. Need-based is generally going to be identified and awarded through the financial aid office. And again, primarily going to be factoring financial need using the FAFSA, or if the institution is also using the CSS profile, which asks some more in-depth questions and different questions than the FAFSA, but not a lot of institutions are using that. But again, the important thing to be mindful of is each institution is going to have their own policies and available funds. So when looking at those schools, it's sometimes tricky to compare the two. Really, what is this figure versus that figure? But the best thing to do is if you have questions about the process, please reach out to the financial aid office or even the admissions office. As part of the admissions application process, they are generally informed on the process and can answer some of those questions as well. So we talked about different types of aid, sources, and general financial aid information. I'll wrap up the presentation, in a couple slides here about what is the FAFSA. So for those of you that have never gone through the financial aid application process, either for yourself or for children, the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It's a standard form that is provided by the Department of Education. We certainly encourage students and families to fill it out electronically for a number of reasons, primarily speed, accuracy, things of that nature. The colleges use the FAFSA information, the EFC results, to award financial aid. So does the state of Maryland. It can be filed at any point during the academic year. So this next bullet point is a little confusing, so I'll explain it a couple times. So it's available October 1st prior to the academic year for which the student requests aid using prior year financial information. So let's just pretend that all of the students that are in your household are seniors in college this year and you're filling out the FAFSA. So students who are planning on going to start college in fall of 2021, so this September, are going to be filling out the 2021-2022 FAFSA application, which became open and available to be completed October 1st of 2020 using 2019 financial information. So I'll repeat that again. So if students are currently seniors and graduating in June of 2021 and planning on going straight to college fall of 2021, they're going to be filling out the 2021-2022 FAFSA application, which became available in October of 2020 using 2019 financial information. And then each following year, it's going to move up a year. So it'll be 2020 financial and tax information, then 21, 22, etc. And again, the FAFSA can be filled out at any point during the academic year. There are deadlines for the state of Maryland, so you want to fill it out by March 1st prior to the academic year. So again, if we were looking at seniors right now applying for the fall semester, that FAFSA would have needed to be completed by March 1st to be considered for Maryland aid. So this is just a screenshot of the FAFSA information. Again, allows electronic submission of the information, and part of the reason we encourage electronic submission rather than printing out a paper and mailing it in, not only for the speed, but because the student and the parent does have the option to use the IRS data retrieval, which would electronically link tax filing information if the student or parent file taxes directly into the FAFSA application, which speeds up the process for schools so they don't need to necessarily request as much information to review that information when we get it. Again, students and parents would sign the FAFSA electronically. Both the student and the parent will create a unique FSA ID or Federal Student Aid ID to sign the FAFSA as well as other federal financial aid forms electronically. So it's important that both the student and the parent create their own ID. And so what happens after the FAFSA? So once the FAFSA has been submitted, the student will receive what's called the student aid report. Student will want to check to make sure the information is correct, or if they want to add or change any information, schools to receive it, things like that. They will have the opportunity to do that. Schools will then receive that FAFSA information as well and will reach out to the student. Again, schools will be communicating directly to the students, not to the parents, letting them know what the status is, if there's any additional documentation that we're requesting, and then they will use that FAFSA and additional information to determine the student's financial need or financial aid award. And then again, each institution reviews the FAFSA. We use that FAFSA result, the EFC, the Expected Family Contribution Index, to determine any federal. We receive information from the state of Maryland as to what aid students might be eligible for, as well as institutional aid. Again, if institutions also use the CSS profile, they will also use that information to determine eligibility for institutional aid. If students receiving outside scholarships, local Kiwanis Club, Lions Club, things like that, those are going to be considered part of the financial aid award. So if the student's aware of those awards, please let the financial aid office know so that they can update the account. And then each school is required to have what's called a net price calculator, which is an estimate of what the expenses are for a student who would be considered similar to you. So you would put in household size, number in college, what the income is, things like that, and it would provide an estimate for what students who were similarly profiled received from that institution in the last 2 years or so. So this is something that all schools are required to have. It is linked into should be linked into the College Navigator website, but it also kind of gives an estimate of what you might expect to receive. But again, it is an estimate. It's nothing that the school will ultimately say, yes, you're absolutely going to get this. It could be higher, it could be lower, depending on other sources of information and availability of funds. So again, studentaid.gov provides some great information on the life cycle of a student. So what you've got here is you've got different tabs on the site that talk about considering school, when the student's in school, they have information for the parent, and then they also have information for repayment if the student has graduated and has student loans. Maryland Higher Education Commission also has a lot of good information based on information for Maryland state programs. Again, gives some of the eligibility criteria, deadlines, things of that nature. Scholarship search engines. These are some good resources for finding out about scholarship information. What I like about some of these program or these search engines is the student would put in some information like, you know, they are going to be a business major with a 3.5, who is a German-American left-handed volleyball player. You'd be surprised at what scholarships will pop up based on the demographics that the student or academic information the student pops up, and then the student will still be responsible for applying for those scholarships. But it's great to be able to kind of use these sites to try and find some scholarships. Then we have CSM dual enrollment program. I just want to briefly touch upon that. This is an opportunity for high school students to kind of get a leg up on taking some college classes at a reduced price. We do partner with Calvert County Public Schools to offer different types of programs or different types of classes. There are some classes that students will take right in the high school and are getting high school credit and college credit at the same time. Other classes they could take through CSM where they would get college credit. All of these different types of programs, student would be eligible for a 50% tuition discount. If the student is eligible for this program, currently CSM is participating with the Department of Education on an experimental Pell Grant program as in an effort to expand college access for the neediest students. Students may be eligible to receive Pell Grant money to help pay for those dual enrollment classes. Normally, one of the criteria to be eligible for financial aid is that the student is a high school graduate, but as part of this experimental program, CSM is able to waive that requirement. And then those college credits that students earn through the dual enrollment program are not just good at CSM. They can be transferred to many other colleges and universities, so that A in calculus that the student takes in the high school or pre-college calculus, things like that, that can transfer over potentially to another institution as well. And so students can get a leg up on kind of freshman standing and ultimately graduation requirements. And so that ends my presentation. I will leave, this is our contact information on the website here. And then, like I said, Ms. Ponte has this slide deck, so she will be able to share that information with anyone who might have some additional questions outside of or think of something afterwards. But with that, I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and it is on stop shared. So, Ms. Ponte?
I think we have a hand raised. I can't see though who it is. If you have a hand raised, feel free to unmute and ask your question.
I had a question for Christian about the dual enrollment. What happens if a child fails the class? I heard about academic probation and not being able to get grants.
So if the student, so we'll kind of work backwards. So from a financial aid perspective, when a student is evaluated for financial aid eligibility on an academic each academic year, there's two components. One is the FAFSA and the financial need, and the second piece is prior academic history. So we are required to take a look at a student's academic enrollment or history at that particular institution. So if we have a student that has enrolled in a dual enrollment program and then plans to enroll at CSM once they've graduated high school, yes, dual enrollment classes are included in the evaluation towards future financial aid eligibility. So if the student did not do so well in a dual enrollment class, again, it is calculated in, but the financial aid office does have the ability, and students do have the ability to submit an appeal to have their financial aid eligibility reinstated. So, for example, maybe the student was doing well in the class but failed the final because they were sick and just couldn't give their best effort, so they failed the class. We certainly can take a look at that information and make a judgment call as to whether to reinstate that student's eligibility. So yes, failing a class does potentially impact financial aid eligibility, but students do also have the opportunity to appeal that and have their aid reinstated.
Christian, can you just not have it transfer if it's not CSM you're going to?
So if a student is going to University of Maryland, it's up to the institution, the individual institution's policy as to how they treat transfer credits or what they require. I can't speak for any other specific institution as to what their policy is on transferring credits or not transferring credits in terms of making them aware of other schools that the student has attended. Generally speaking, so if a student has a transcript and let's say they have 3 classes that they earned an A in and a class that they earned a D in. So when the student submits that academic transcript to the institution, that institution is going to look at all 4 courses, but chances are from that academic institution's perspective, they're only going to give student the transfer credit for the 3 classes that they passed with an A. Even though that the transcript has that D as well. So if it's on an academic transcript and it gets sent over, that institution is going to have access to all of it. You can't just ask CSM to say, I only want you to notify them of this class or that class.
Just as another thing, you might have brought it up, this is Ms. Harris again, but so if this is way ahead of the ball game, but if your kid goes to school and goes, we're going to take the first semester easy and we're going to take 12 credits or 15 credits, and then they're bombing chem and lab and they want to drop it so it doesn't affect their GPA and they go below the 12 credits when they drop that 4 credit Kim, then that takes away their financial aid, correct? Because they went below 12?
The caveat that I'm going to answer first is speak to the individual financial aid office. And the reason being is each program is going to have different requirements as to remaining eligible either in that academic semester or in future semesters. So it is potentially a matter of timing. So for example, if the student drops a class, let's say the first week of the class, that's going to potentially have a financial impact financial aid wise for that semester, whereas the student who drops the class at midterms, it may not have a financial impact. It all depends on what the requirements are for each program. And when I say program, I mean financial aid program. So the best bet is to talk to the financial aid office to determine both what would happen for the current semester as well as any potential impact on future semesters. But generally speaking, it will not be an all or nothing for one class.
Thank you.
And if you guys do have any questions, feel free to unmute or type in the chat. I don't see anyone raising their hands. Does anyone else have any questions? Christian, I think you killed it this morning, man. You covered it all. No one has any questions.
Either that or they haven't had their coffee yet.
Oh, wait, I think I heard someone.
Please. So do you have any advice for students who are not involved extracurricular with anything besides their academics? They're not involved in clubs or programs, have very good grades, but really meet no other criteria, including there's no need. So do you have any advice for somebody very average who really has no need?
So really, you've got a couple of different types of financial aid programs, and again, I don't know what your individual situation is. You may believe that you have no need, but from a private institution's perspective, you may very well have need. You know, so again, I don't want to just discount that completely. Just throwing that out there. But the other thing is take a look at what the different scholarship programs are at the different institutions. There are some scholarship programs that are geared towards the top of the class. There are other ones that are geared towards, you know, potentially that next tier. The schools may be trying to recruit certain types of students, academic programs. So, you know, if a student is looking at a unique major or not necessarily the more popular majors, there may be additional funding that way. So really, it's just a matter of kind of trying to take a look at what the students are interested in, what are some, you know, types of schools, programs, things like that. And then a lot of local organizations, you know, they are looking not necessarily, again, for that top of the class. It's, you know, it really kind of is, how does that student fit with the values and the beliefs of that particular organization? So just because a student is not involved in 12 different community service organizations or, you know, president of the marching band, student government, all of that, doesn't mean that it's that they wouldn't qualify it. All it takes is that one connection that could lean the student towards receiving funds from that organization.
Any other questions this morning? All right, guys. Well, with that, I want to thank Christian for giving up his time and coming to share his information. He's one of the best, in my opinion. He knows it all, and he's really, really good about sharing information. So you guys do have his contact information. I sent that out via email. So if you guys need anything, feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to Christian. Don't forget to Michelle Kidwell of Chesapeake College Plan. She's also a fantastic resource and can help you every step of the way with the financial aid process. So we've got a lot of resources here, and I know financial aid is a scary topic, but we are certainly here to help. So if there's anything we can do, let us know, guys. But thank you, everybody, for coming today, and thanks again, Christian. We really appreciate you.
Take care, everyone.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.